will say I was the ruin of a kingdom. I have learned that courts choose their tragedies the way a falcon chooses the wind, swiftly, without mercy, and with every feather at attention. But let these pages deny at least one lie, that my heart was idle. No, it labored like a hidden bell, rung at midnight for a soul unshriven. Tonight the steward locked my chamber with a ceremony that felt like burial. Yet the moon found the crack between shutters and spread a strip of milk over my table, and I write by it as though I were kneeling at a silver altar. I can still smell him on my sleeves, a trace of saddle leather and crushed time, though I wore the ermine mantle at vespers to smother it. If I do not set down the whole of it now, a scribe will set it down for me later, and I would rather be guilty by my own hand. It began the winter. The Danebord snows climbed halfway up the east tower, and the Lord Admiral sealed the harbor in ice with a prayer no saint would have blessed. The king, my lord and husband, took counsel behind red-lacquered doors with men who fear only famine and the laughter of their wives. He had been married 6 years, and in that time I played well my part. I knew when to let jewels speak for me, when to let silence bridle a boar, and when to loose a rumor so gentle it landed like thistledown and took root like ivy. But a kingdom is a living thing with a hunger of its own. I felt it most acutely in the moments after Mass, when the courtiers bowed too low to look me in the eye. They kept me as one keeps a legendary sword, polished, displayed, never drawn. Then came Sir Rowan of the Grey Marches, with a treaty stitched into the seams of his cloak and wilderness in his manner. He bowed to me the way one acknowledges fire in a hearth, grateful for its heat and mindful of the burn. At our first meeting, he spoke too plainly for the palace, and it made the dais feel suddenly honest, like a stone you might sit upon to think. I have ridden 7 days over iced earth to say what others will not, he told the court, his voice carrying as if the hall were cut from a mountain. The border barons will not send wheat if the king's new levies take another son. They will send iron, and not the taxed sort, the hall hissed. The king's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. I felt something as subtle as the tilt of a swallow's wing, the air changing. Sir Rowan met my eyes only briefly, as if to say, I have spoken into a storm. Forgive me for bringing weather indoors. That night the king dismissed him with clipped civility, but I sent a cup of mulled wine to his quarters, with my seal pressed into the wax. The tray returned empty, my seal unbroken. The next day I passed him in the long corridor to the oratory. He bowed, and his lips quirked once, like a man who has survived a river crossing and found his boots still dry. You do not drink wine, I asked, stopping before him. My ladies-in-waiting rustled like startled birds. I drink truth when it is poured for me, your grace, he replied. And I did not know whose cup it was. Whose cup it was, so we began. He taught me the names of winds I had only felt as moods, the knife edge that comes from the north in late autumn, the bare breath from the hills, the hollowed-out stillness that means snow at noon. I taught him the names of those who smiled like candles, but burned as torches. We traded each other's worlds across the breadth of a carved table in the library, my gloves off, his hands smelling of horse. He had a scar near his temple that disappeared into his hairline. I traced it in the candle's reflection when he bent over maps, not daring to lift my hand to where the urge truly led. The first time he touched me, it was the smallest possible sin. We both reached for the same letter, a missive bound with yellow thread from his sister in the marches. And when our fingers met, the jolt was a bell struck. He apologized. I laughed too quickly. The letter slid to the floor. In retrieving it, his shoulder brushed my knee with a care that was itself a declaration. We were careful after that, too careful, until carefulness became its own sort of caress. The way a dancer's hovered hand is more charged than a grasp. I will not pretend that I did not understand the precipice we approached. A queen is trained to hear the sound of grain sliding in an hourglass from 3 rooms away. I counted measures of danger as easily as I counted my rosary. That is perhaps why, when the treason came, it wore the scent of hyssop and iron. It arrived on a saint's day. The bells shook out joy onto streets rutted with thaw, and yet the palace was a hive of closed doors. The king's brother, Prince Adrian, smiled as if he had discovered a new spice. His wife, the Duchess Savorine, my dear friend since girlhood, wore pearls that told me she had decided to be brave. I would say I missed the first dagger because I was looking at the pearls, but that is not true. I missed the first dagger because it had the courtesy to approach in daylight, with petitions stacked atop its blade. The barons of the Grey Marches, pressed by famine and by prayers that went unanswered, had sent a delegation asking for mercy on the levies. Adrian intercepted them, offered them audience in the hunting lodge at the river's bend, and left my household entirely ignorant. Only Rowan noticed their absence and went looking. He found more than he sought. Adrian had bought not only their silence, but their soldiers. The night guard would be drunk on doctored ale by Compline. The portcullis would judder open like a yawn. There would be a palace fire, wherein all that was inconvenient would be reduced to sweet-smelling ash. And come morning, they would mourn me inside a chapel, hung with my favorite blue banners. Rowan brought the news to me with his jaw set like a clasp. He could not hide what it cost him to come at all. If I shout this in the great hall, he said, the conspirators will raise their hands with the innocents, and the master of the cup will die before he confesses. If I go to the king, Adrian will hear me coming and unclasp the trap. If I take a sword, I am 1 man against 20. So I bring it where I bring all things that matter, to you. I laughed then, and the sound shocked us both, the laugh of a woman who recognizes at last the fabulous joke of her own high station. To me, I said, and tried to fit the situation into the shape of my tools. Laces, letters, rooms, faces. The palace is a body. I knew its arteries. Then we will bleed it in the right place. We did not kiss. We did not even stand too close. How careful we were at the very edge of ruin. The plan we made was so simple that a monk could have illuminated it in the width of a margin. I sent for Savorine. I told her that I had chosen the feast to confess to her my great private sin, that I had not consigned my heart to God wholly, or to my husband fully, that I feared I was built for worship as much as for rule, and that if she demanded it, I would lock away my red velvet diary, confess to the bishop, and break off what was not yet broken. She looked at me long, and what I saw there was not condemnation, but a woman who knows she has come to the one road where every direction costs. Adrian loves power more than he loves triumph, she said at last. He will spare you if you are already penitent. Spare me for what? I asked, soft. I have not sinned. You have breathed, she replied, and kissed my brow like a benediction. When she left, it was with a grace that split my heart. She would save the kingdom, even if it meant unmaking her own bed. By vespers, the lodge at the river was a reef of gossip. I sent a note to Adrian written in my own hand that I wished to speak with him alone beneath the pear trees at midnight, and that it concerned the very absolution I had just sought from his wife. I wrote that I would come veiled, so that God alone could witness our parley. I sealed the letter with a prince's seal that was not his, and ensured he would hear of it from 3 mouths he believed, and 1 he did not. I also ensured, through the quiet choreography of keys and cloaks, that the king would go to the wrong garden at the right hour. Rowan took a different path. He pulled on the old duty owed him by a captain of the watch he had once saved from a spring flood, and set a second guard beneath the second gate, the one that groans like a dying stag, and is therefore never used. He sent a runner to the cook with a whisper to forget, to sweeten the night ale. He found the priest who had held his grandmother's hand as she died, and asked for a bell to be rung at midnight for a soul struggling with a lie. It was a neat tapestry, too neat for men who prefer nets. At midnight the bell rang, and Adrian, half drunk on his own story, stepped into the pear garden with his cloak unfastened so he could seize me grandly when I threw myself at his feet. It is astonishing how certain a man can be that the world is at last becoming the mirror he ordered for it. I did not come. The king did, thundering, oh, he roared at my absence, cursed when he found only a grinning brother in the moonlight. Words flew, hands followed. Meanwhile, the lodge doors opened like friendly teeth, and barons in their best furs walked into a room where the ale tasted of disappointment, and the guards were wide-eyed as calves. Rowan barred the doors from outside and set a horn to his lips. That was the moment the conspirators learned the flaw common to all careful plans. Men are not clocks. Adrian heard the horn, saw the king's hand go to the dagger at his belt, and chose the wrong kind of courage. He lunged, caught the king's sleeve, tore it. A watching page screamed. Savorine, who had followed her husband with the kind of stealth a woman learns in a palace, no rustle, no scent stepped between the brothers like a candle flame. You will not, she said, not in my sight. Adrian faltered, calculation battling blood. Stay behind me, he snapped to her, a habit, not a command, and made his second mistake. He looked at me. I had come at last, my veil loose around my throat, my hands empty. I said his name, not my prince, not brother, not my lord. Adrian. And in that moment, he understood there was a world outside his theater. He lowered the dagger by the breadth of a breath. The king struck him. I cannot decorate what followed. The 2 men wept and brawled and called each other boys' names. The courtiers gaped. A guardsman, unsure for whom to be loyal, raised a horn of his own. The second gate crews, hearing it wrong, thought the lodge had fallen. The lodge men, hearing 2 horns, thought they should draw theirs. 3 horns sounded, then 4. Night is a treacherous ally. She makes every blade look honest. Rowan found me in that confusion and put out his palm. The first true touch we had ever permitted ourselves. "If I take you from this garden," he said, voice steady, "I can keep you breathing until sunrise. After that, the kingdom will decide whether it still wants you." "Take me," I said, because the truth had become a storm, and there is nothing to do in a storm but bow to its instruction. We fled not to the stables, not to the postern gate, but to the laundry, which I knew better than any lady should. We wrapped ourselves in linen as if we were ghosts, and slipped into the yards where steam plumed like battlefield smoke. There Rowan kissed me at last, a swift vow stamped into my mouth, and for one heartbeat I let myself be no one's queen. "Forgive me," he whispered, breath warm. I wanted the first to be under a June sky, with a harp in earshot, and no sorrow nearer than harvest. "You will have worse than sorrow for this," I said, which is not what lovers say. But I am not skilled at lies to the one I truly love. We parted at the copper vats, God's joke. He loves his little symbols, and I went to the chapel while Rowan ran toward the river. From the chapel, I could hear the bells raging like an argument with the Almighty. In the dark, I met Savorine again, her pearls like planets, her eyes bluer than fear allows. "I have sent Adrian to the priory," she said. "If he runs, let him run under a cowl. If he returns, he will return civilized by boredom." "And the king?" I asked. "In the lodge with his pride, counting every grain spilled as a morsel stolen," she replied. And I loved her in that moment more than I could love my own reflection. "Do not go to him yet. You will be his penance while the wound is fresh, and that is not the service a kingdom needs." She took my hands and squeezed until the bones agreed to be brave. "Did you love Rowan before tonight?" she asked. "Yes," I said, because in the chapel one owes the truth, even if there is no priest listening. "And he you?" "Yes." She nodded. "Then we will work as if you do not," she said, "for now." For now is the measure by which queens live and lovers starve. The days since have been a tapestry stitched with hurried hands. The barons signed a charter that cost them nothing but pride. The levees were revised. The harbor ice broke early, as if the sea itself had thrust its shoulder against the piers. The king made a show of dispatching riders to scour the marches for brigands who plotted fires, and he dined with me beneath banners that did not match, because the stewards had been too busy saving the curtains to save our dignity. He has not asked me about the garden. He will. He is a man who saves his hardest questions for when he can use the answers. For now, he treads carefully around me, like a hunter circling a mired stag, pitying, patient, waiting for the ground to decide the matter. As for Rowan, he has vanished with the competence of a man who has had to survive his own honesty before. Rumors breed wherever he is not. He took a boat downriver. He took a fast horse north. He hides in a shepherd's skin and sleeps under a sky that does not remember men's names. I write more than I sleep. practice telling the story the way they will want to hear it. A queen momentarily unmoored, rescued by the gravity of her good sense, restored to her rightful orbit by the pull of duty. It is almost plausible if I whisper it to myself in an empty room. But I will give to these pages what I cannot give to the council or the chroniclers. I am not sorry for the kiss. I am not sorry for the way his hand found the back of my neck and held me like something both precious and indestructible. I am not sorry that on the night the kingdom nearly burned, I chose a slant path through steam and linen, and breathed as a woman and not a relic. I am sorry only that I cannot stop writing his name in the margins of everything. Rowan of the grey marches, born under a sky that breaks wide at dawn and opens like a wound at dusk. Rowan who reads the wind from a horse's ear. Rowan who taught me the word for the cold that comes when snow begins to think about itself. Serene. Rowan who looked at me as at a fire he had no right to warm his hands at, and did it anyway, like a man choosing life over manners. They will say I was the ruin of a kingdom. Perhaps I am the hinge it needed. Perhaps I am both, ruin and remedy, sweetened poison, mother of peace, stepmother of scandal. Court lutes are already being tuned into truth. Give a man rhyme, and he will forgive a multitude. Give a woman a diary, and she will refuse to be forgiven or condemned on anyone's schedule but her own. Tonight I cut from my pillow one down feather and set it in this book to mark the place where the world changed. It looks like a scratch of winter sky or a smudge of a saint's breath. If someone finds it when I have become an oil painting, let them imagine a queen with unmessy hair and a mouth that did not disobey itself. The truth is less noble and more human. There was soot on my sleeve. There was desire in my throat like a swallowed ember. And there was a country outside the window that had the decency to keep sleeping while we decided how to save it. And now, there is a new rumor, fast as a kite string taut between rooftop and hand. A boy from the river ward ran into the kitchen with a story that makes the scullions drop spoons. A rider crossed the East Bridge at dusk with an arrow in his shoulder, and the king's signet ring-clenched in his teeth. He fell at the statue of Saint Bridget and would not give his name. The sisters took him in. They say he spoke only once to ask whether the pear trees were in bloom. It is spring. I have sent Savorine with a physician and a veil. The king is at Hawks